Hey, Thomas here with another video for the Artisan Sound channel. So today is the day we're going to open West Side Story at the Artisan. And I just wanted to give you a last final summary report here of our setup between the X32 programming and the Qlab MIDI command control triggers that set all the changes that are required within the board throughout the entire show. So the Qlab operator has a little bit of extra work with a few mutes and unmutes that happen outside of music, but everything else has been automated without any manual intervention, I suppose. So here are the cues, here are the snippets. All right, so it just kind of goes through everything. Many of them use customized DCA group setups. So both the labels on the DCA groups as well as the routing of which of the 16 mic channels go into these groups, into which DCA groups are customized frequently throughout the show. And that's that. So I showed you that how I do this and why I do this in other videos before. My main objective is, of course, always to make it as smooth and as automated as possible, at least with regards to muting and unmuting the microphones that need to be open. And then the secondary objective is that I'm going to be able to mix the entire show just by mainly looking at these 8 DCA group tracks, group faders, and I'll be able to access them on an iPad, which means I can run the mix from anywhere in the auditorium, which is, in my opinion, the only good place to mix a show, because that's the only place where you can actually hear what the audience hears. And so that's why I'm a strong proponent of doing that. So this is the setup again in the X32. This is the X32 edit that just kind of reflects exactly what the setup is and what's going on. And let's go over to Qlab and maximize this here real quick, so I can show you how this is principally set up. There's a bunch of X's here because I'm doing this on the laptop that is not used to run the show. And so there are a bunch of invalid light cues and video cues and stuff like that. And you can see, so whenever there's a number here, that's an actual music cue, right? Like that. And then in between, we have sometimes actions that are additional mic mutes or mic unmutes. For example, here, Shark's exit. So that's just actually just one single mute. So in general, the MIDI events that are relevant to the X32 setup and control are basically either recalling cues, cues which then trigger or use certain snippets, or they are individual mic mutes and unmutes, right? So typically, let's say here, Krupkin Schrank exit. Okay, that's actually recalling a cue. So that's setting up the entire board setting, possibly with a lot of changes. Sometimes the changes are more, sometimes they're less, but you can basically control the entire board setting of all relevant parameters that are defined to be saved in that snippet that we're recalling here with this cue number 2. And then this is an example for an individual actor entering the stage, so it's just an individual unmute, and then same character exit, so that's an individual mute. And so every event here is a separate event that has to be manually triggered most of the time. Sometimes they're chained to each other where the second, the following one automatically follows the next one. And I've labeled this here like this. So this is how this works. And then generally also there are stop cues in there. That is, we're using those by just putting a fade on the music track that is playing. And whenever something happens that triggers a stop of the music, then we hit this cue, which automatically fades the music and then can also do other things. So in this case, We have the auto follow here set like this, so you basically trigger the fade here. It waits however long, this is just 1 second, so this might as well just be incorporated into the next group. So sometimes there are different ways to set it up, and it's all the same effect essentially. Here's one of the rare cases where I'm actually using DCA volume controls in this case. So there are these loud mumbo shouts where I don't want to forget to move all the DCA group faders all together to a relatively low volume setting so that the shouts don't come out too loud. So those are the kind of rare cases where I kind of just remind myself and let the machine do its thing. Other than that, the show is not too complex to mix in terms of having to do sudden changes on the DCA fader groups or group faders. So that's why I decided to mix mostly manually, just off of the iPad. And like I said, every now and then I use a little reminder help to either set the volume level of an incoming music cue to the correct volume so it doesn't play too loud if I don't remember, or I preset the volume for the microphone DCA groups that are using the DCA groups for the microphones. I could talk a little bit more about some artistic decisions. Those are kind of mostly technical stuff here that we're talking about, that we've been talking about in these videos. There are a couple of interesting, I find relatively interesting things. One is the treatment of reverb on the microphone tracks. There are some pretty creative opportunities in this show. So generally speaking, I always use some reverb and some delay. Depends on what fits good into the music track and the effects that are already on the music tracks and the effects I might add to the music tracks to be able to blend the vocals, particularly when they're singing, into the music track. So I always use some type of reverb or delay effect for that. And then in this particular show, there's also an opportunity to sometimes kind of evoke a little bit of an ambience of where we are, like when we're under the highway bridge where the rumble happens. That's obviously a reverberant environment where I actually use reverb on the dialogue vocals as well, so on the dialogue there, and we also have projections that help with that and help put us in that place. So I'm using reverb on those in those cases as well. So if you come to the show, that would be nice. You can see all these things in live how it works out. So another thing that I'm thinking about making a video about, there are two other things, and I'm just gonna throw them out here. I'm not going to put them into this video, but just for you to maybe give me some feedback on what you would like to see. One is the history of transitioning the theater in the round that we have at Artisan from a strictly mono everywhere speaker layout to now what we have really a stereofied in the round setup. And so we just completed the second stage on that, where all four sides now have two speakers that are projecting the stereo image of the music track. And I actually found some interesting information about, or I guess experiences that I wasn't completely anticipating, but that are all really awesome. As I was doing that, as I was working on these transitions. So that might be a pretty interesting video. If you're interested in that, let me know. Another interesting video is how I'm using one of the matrix stereo channels. I've configured two matrix stereo channels, or two matrix tracks as a stereo pair, so that I can record a slightly different mix on the board of the audio that is happening. So when we do video recordings in the theater, we can actually use better audio quality because The music track is going to that mix digitally. It doesn't have to be recorded through camera mics in the room. And the microphones and the effects and everything is bussed that way, but I'm creating a slightly different mix and using slightly different, I would say, optimization criteria to facilitate that. So I can maybe make a video about that if you're interested in knowing about how to do that on the X32 and what you kind of have to watch for and what the outcomes are. All right, so with that said, this is the conclusion of my West Side Story sound tech preparation videos and documentation. Thanks for watching all of these, and I look forward to starting the next series on the next show pretty soon. Until then, this is Thomas Bartke signing off. Leave me a comment, like the video, and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to get notified when our next video is being released. Thanks!